proud to lead your team of ACT MPs, Brooke van Velden, Nicole McKee, Todd Stevenson, Andrew Hoggard, Karen Chhour, Mark Cameron, Simon Court, Paramjit Parmar, Laura McClure and Cameron Luxton.
Madam Speaker, how great is it to be a member of the ACT Party? Absolutely fantastic.
This government is not throwing chum to a feeding frenzy of consultants feasting on hundreds of millions of dollars of bike bridge and Auckland light rail fantasies.
That's a very good example of how this government is doing things better, faster and smarter.
No woman in this parliament, nor in this country, should be subjected to sex-based discrimination.
We speak to the individual rather than the collectivism of the left, and we certainly don't beat up those that are successful.
I'm proud that my party has had the bravery, the clarity and the patriotism to raise uneasy topics. And I challenge other parties to find those qualities in themselves and support this bill.
It's not this magic lolly scramble of you get something, you get something.
All ratepayers deserve relief, and respecting ratepayers and their money when councils are spending that money is the only real way for ratepayers across New Zealand, the people who have been mentioned by the opposition, to get real rates relief.
This is all the Green Party does, is criticise New Zealand dairy farmers, New Zealand farmers. You seem to not want to have any farmers in this country. We should be celebrating our farmers.
And yes, we are achieving over 99% on-time delivery.
We need to think about how we can best protect our children, our youth going forward.
We do not want that kind of subjective interpretation in our legal system.
I actually refuse to stand here and be lectured by a member of that previous government who made absolutely no progress when it came to the safety of the well-being of our young people. The state of Oranga Tamariki when I took over was absolutely disgusting, and I'm not going to allow that to continue.
Patients must be at the forefront of everything we're doing in health. In an ACT, we totally agree with that.
We believe success shouldn't hinge on a one-size-fits-all model.
A bit of context and full disclosure, I am a dairy farmer, as you are all well aware, and a Fonterra supplier. And I absolutely love rural New Zealand.
We've got to stop this woke madness. Kiwis engaging in our health system deserve confidence that they are being treated and foremost as humans with individual needs, and that their needs will be met on valid silence.
The Sentencing Reinstating Three Strikes Amendment Bill will help make our communities and victims feel safe again, as they are entitled to and as ACT promised.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cameron Luxton, and welcome to ACT's 2025 rally, Free and Equal. Yeah. It's great to see so many of you here today, because your time is valuable. So we understand that for you, this isn't just an afternoon of entertainment, it's an investment in the values you believe in: freedom, personal responsibility and equal rights. Values that have built this country, and values that must be defended and advanced at every turn. You'll hear from my ACT colleagues on the front lines in Wellington, advancing your values, cutting red tape, restoring choice, empowering people to be the change in their own lives. Later, I'll introduce our guest speaker, Dr. James Lindsay. We've brought him here to the bottom of the world because he's one of the world's sharpest voices, pushing back against identity politics, defending free speech and rational thought. Finally, you'll hear from David. He'll lay out how ACT has a positive vision to tackle challenges New Zealand faces without the division that has crept into our country's politics. Now let's get started. Our first speaker today has worked in Parliament for nearly 8 years. First as a staffer, shepherding through end-of-life choice, then as an MP, before becoming one of the youngest cabinet ministers in New Zealand's history. She is reforming inflexible labour laws, health and safety madness and the Broken Holidays Act, amongst much more. She is tireless in her efforts and cool under fire. In fact, I have only heard her swear once. Please welcome ex-Deputy Leader, the Minister for Workplace Relations and Safety and the Minister for Internal Affairs, Brooke van Velden.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is so good to see you all. I can't believe we are over halfway through this government's first term. It has been a very busy 20 months. And while each week I get sucked down into Wellington and the bustle of Parliament, I am always thinking of real New Zealand. You guys here and the people out there, the thinkers and the doers, the workers, the business owners, employers and entrepreneurs doing their best to hustle, produce and pay staff. The people that governments really need to operate and keep our country moving forward. I wish to thank all those Kiwis who get up each day, even when it's tough out there, and keep going, thinking, dreaming, producing and employing. You are the economy, and we work for you. Since getting into government, I've achieved significant changes to get us closer to this being a reality. I've reinstated 90-day trials, removed fair pay agreements, and I've turned my mind to the problems making it more difficult than necessary to do business and employ more Kiwis. The main one, health and safety. I actually get excited about health and safety now, and not about the technicalities. I swear I'm not quite that boring, but about how real change can be transformative for companies, workers, productivity and culture around the country. Last year, I travelled across New Zealand hearing from farmers, volunteer organisations, construction workers, manufacturers and, well, anyone who wanted to talk. And it painted a picture that we are far too focused on paperwork and box ticking rather than actual risk reduction. A culture of fear is stifling innovation, depressing productivity and sucking the joy out of life. I've heard you and I've acted. The government will be moving forward to create a carve-out from health and safety law for small, low-risk businesses. We'll be changing the main purpose of the law, and what everyone needs to focus on is reducing and managing critical risks, or those actions that lead to death and serious injury. In some cases, even when the law is fit for purpose on paper, we see over-compliance. 100 road cones when maybe just 10 would do. Again, that culture of fear. The road cone hotline I've set up is really just a small example of a new direction in safety. I've instructed WorkSafe to be more helpful to businesses with little time and money by giving upfront guidance. My goal is that businesses will spend less money, time and resource sweating the small stuff and more on their core activities. Businesses and workers will focus on managing critical risks, so workers return home to their families and communities at the end of each day. That's what all of us want. Making it easier to do the stuff that matters with less time on paperwork means Kiwis have more time to grow their business, more money to employ and pay more Kiwis, and more focus on delivering fantastic goods and services that make our lives better. It's also about the Kiwi way of life. We want to be able to get out and enjoy the great outdoors, hiking, horse trekking, climbing and fly fishing. So, I've clarified that landowners who allow recreational activity on their land will not be held liable if someone gets hurt. And we're learning from lessons of the past. If we ever saw a culture of fear, it was during COVID. Labor delivered a toothless inquiry, so I've expanded it, and now we finally have public hearings and real accountability for the decisions that locked us down, shuttered businesses, and divided our society. My belief is that we can move forward with less fear and more confidence to live safely, freely and equally. ACT's work continues, and I can't wait for my colleagues here to share their progress with you too. Once again, thank you for your support of me, for your support of ACT, and for your support of our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your work, Brooke, in improving New Zealand's culture and getting us back to what we want to do best. It's now my honour to introduce someone who's brought more common sense but also brought consequences back to the justice system. Nicole McKee, ACT's Minister for Courts and Associate Minister of Justice. Nicole's extensive work program is seeing more criminals locked up and freeing businesses from the burdensome red tape that wastes time and drives up the costs for all of us. She is also championing fair firearms reform and ensuring law-abiding hunters and other licensed firearm owners can continue to do what they love while putting public safety at the forefront and keeping firearms out of the wrong hands. Please welcome someone who's delivering real results and real reforms. Nicole McKee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Wow, what a busy, exciting and fulfilling first half of my term as a Minister of the Crown, a minister that's acting for you. Thank you, every one of you, for your unwavering support. I want to start with crime, because protecting people's safety and property is the state's first duty. If we can't do that, if thugs and thieves can destroy your life's work in an instant, then nothing else matters. Labour tried being kind to criminals in the hope that they would be kind in return. New Zealanders paid the price. At one point, there was a ram raid every 15 hours. Shopkeepers had to lock themselves behind bars just to stay safe. Violent offenders were put on home detention only to re-offend. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know what happens when you set a target to cut the prison population without actually reducing the crime. We've restored real consequences for criminals and put the rights of victims first. 3 strikes is back, baby. Section 27 cultural reports are defunded. We've introduced tougher sentences for a range of offences, and we've ended the excessive sentence discounts for those who feign their remorse only to continue to re-offend. We've put the rights of victims at the centre of sentencing, and we are expanding the prison capacity so that no one who should be free walks free because there's no room. No one should be walking free because there's no room in the prison. I've also secured investment to speed up the courts so that victims see justice delivered faster, and the results are already showing. Between February 2024 and April 2025, active court cases in backlog decreased by 11%. And in the Auckland metro area, where our initiatives have been most focused, the backlog has decreased by 26%. Normally, ACT rallies against spending, but here we make no apology. Locking criminals up is probably the best money we're ever going to spend. No one can assault you or steal your property when they're behind bars. And as the Minister responsible for the proceeds of crime, I've taken the money that Labour was giving to gangs who profited from meth, using it instead to fight meth itself. As Associate Minister of Justice, I also have responsibility for firearms reforms, anti-money laundering and the countering of financing of terrorism, the sale and supply of alcohol, sex workers, security guards, proceeds of crime, justice of the peace, real estate agents authority and more. In fact, you could probably say that my job is to deal with guns, booze, sex and dirty money. What it's really about is cutting mindless paperwork and compliance so businesses and customers can get on with life. The changes that I'm making will make it much easier to open a bank account for your child or to sell property that's being held in a trust without having to provide a mountain of personal information and legal work just to prove who you are. It will help a small business which employs a bookkeeper to do their accounts every month. And instead of forcing the bookkeeper to treat their client like they are a criminal by collecting ID from the entire family, documenting company ownership and monitoring monthly transactions like they're a bank, I'm implementing a risk-based approach with simplified checks, saving time, costs and the hassle. It means less time and money wasted on things that don't matter, so you can focus on what does. For the government, it means directing our focus to organised criminals and serious financial crimes while leaving you to get on with your life. I've taken exactly the same approach to firearms reform. Labour's rush laws didn't make New Zealand safer. They alienated responsible people who follow the rules and take safety seriously, while gangs continued to wreak havoc. We've delivered relief for clubs and ranges so people can learn safely in supervised environments. And at the same time, we've strengthened police powers to keep firearms out of the hands of real criminals. With my ACT colleagues, I stood up to our coalition partners over the firearms registry, a system that risks becoming a sealed-to-order list for gangs. We're now rewriting the Arms Act. We're going to deliver a practical, workable law that keeps New Zealanders safe, while respecting those who use firearms for hunting, for pest control, sport, or to feed their families. It's a big work program, and this speech barely scratches the surface. But if there's one thing that sums it up, it's this. Labour spent 6 years freeing criminals and punishing success. We're flipping the script. We're freeing you to succeed and making sure that the criminals are the ones that get punished. Thank you all again for your support.
Thank you, Nicole. And up next, someone who grew up in foster care and after an extraordinary journey is now not only an ACT MP, but she's also the Minister for Children. Karen didn't come to Parliament to play identity games. She came to give hope and opportunity to the most vulnerable kids in New Zealand, and she's delivered. We've all seen her stand strong in the face of personal attacks, unwavering in her commitment to New Zealand, where all children can feel safe and loved, no matter their race or background. I couldn't be prouder to have her as a colleague. Please welcome Karen Chhour.
Thank you everyone for such a warm welcome. It's always a privilege anytime I get to talk to you. Our team of champions and supporters, we are brought together by a shared commitment of free speech, free enterprise, and a vision of New Zealand where hard work and dedication will always matter more than just the colour of your skin. The theme of this conference, Free and Equal, is one that speaks to me personally. It sums up why I entered politics in the first place and what motivates me to keep going when opposition gets personal and nasty. I believe in a free and equal New Zealand. I joined this party and accepted the call to run for Parliament because I knew this party, our party, believe in it too. I was also motivated to enter politics because I saw that the government of the time was letting us down. We are a country that strives to be free and equal, but we have been failed by previous governments more focused on racial politics and identity wars than ensuring the safety of children and young people, than allowing individuals to succeed and lift their families out of what can be generational cycles of poverty, welfare, abuse, and And that's just not good enough. For far too long, New Zealand has accepted that some families will be allowed to fail because they're stuck in the cycle and not encouraged to seek better. We've accepted that some children will commit crimes and some will hurt others, and that some children will die because we're too scared to intervene. I know none of you in this room accept that, and I don't accept that. During my brief time as Minister for Children, I've taken a safety-first approach. I stood in front of you last year to explain why I was fighting to repeal Section 7AA. Now I can proudly report back today, job done. This now means no more requirements that put children in unsafe environments or keep children in unsafe environments because they happen to be born of a particular race. It means in law that oranga tamariki is solely focused on their core responsibility now, which is the care and protection of our children. And I've ended targets that require a certain percent of contracts must go to Māori or iwi organisations, even when other organisations or providers might be getting better results. This has been made possible thanks to people like yourselves and supporters like you. Your kind words over the years have powered my efforts, and the result is young people in difficult circumstances now have a chance for a better future. You've also allowed myself and my colleagues to address a long-standing and until recently growing ill of our country, youth crime. Crime affects us all. We're committed to reducing the number of Kiwis being victimised and improving the supports provided to victims of crime. It affects our economy by robbing from hard-working business owners. It affects workers by making them live in fear. And it affects our sense of community. Chris Hipkins complains that he doesn't see news stories on ram raids anymore, when under his watch he was seeing at least one a day. Well, there's a reason for that. And it's not because the media aren't looking, it's because we've actually done something about it. Under our watch, youth crime is reduced by 12% in less than a year. ACT refused to accept a New Zealand that allowed peaceful, productive people to live in fear, and we're getting results. And we're helping serious, persistent youth offenders turn their lives around. We've worked closely with families to address generational cycles of incarceration, not by letting them get away with it, or by encouraging their bad behaviour, as the parties on the left would, but by increasing the number of tools we have to address our most serious youth offenders. There is no more KFC and encouragement for young people who commit crimes. We are no longer negotiating with them. We are setting a standard and providing them a chance to want to better themselves. We're on the side of victims, but we're also dedicated to ensuring we allow less people to be victimised. I'll leave you with a question. What kind of country do we want to live in? I'm proud to be a New Zealander, but I'm not proud of everything that I see. Our young people deserve real hope for their futures, and this is why your support for ACT is so important. Together we're building a fair, decent, and dare I say, kind nation that others talked about and then did the absolute opposite. We are the one party that is committed to free and equal future. Thank you.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce someone who knows farming. He understands the pressure on rural New Zealand and is doing something about it. Along with my other colleague, Mark Cameron, Andrew is one of the few real farmers in Parliament. While some politicians turn up to field days with clean, brand new red bands and some tartan wear, Andrew is the real deal. He's not playing dress up. He produces the finest milk in the district somewhere north of Feilding. Please welcome ACT Minister for Biosecurity and Food Safety, Associate Minister for the Environment, Associate Minister for Agriculture, Andrew Hoggard.
Well, thank you very much, Cameron, and good afternoon, everyone. Look, 18 months ago when we came into government, farmer confidence was at an all-time low, driven not only by high inflation, which in turn creates high interest rates, but also by a multitude of green tape, from SNAs to over-the-top farm plans that apparently required some sort of understanding of the treaty to be able to write. On top of that, there were a number of freshwater regulations that basically sucked the fun out of farming, but more importantly made investments into future growth a no-go option. It wasn't just the producers of our food that were over-regulated. All through our food system, we had red tape that was constraining innovation and competition. The case of Ag and Hawk Chemicals is a good, high-profile example of this, but there's also many others, such as the Waikato biltong maker that I visited a few months back. Now, he wanted to produce a lot more products than what he was doing, but the paperwork and the cost just to do a trial means that he sticks with only the 4 products he produces. In my role of Associate Environment Minister, I moved as quickly as possible to stop the previous government's direction to councils to identify and map new SNAs. Instead of a system that punishes farmers for looking after nature, I'm looking at how can the private sector reward them. Farm plans in the future will be a much slimmed-down version that just focuses on how to minimise contaminant loss from farms, and then also replace a whole bunch of consents to enable farmers to just get on with farming. In the freshwater space, ACT is pushing hard to ensure that we have sensible local limit setting based on local geology and science, not a one-size-fits-all spirituality from Wellington. With food safety, I have visited food businesses to hear the stories of their red tape nightmares firsthand. From the home-based small business to some of our most iconic brands, they all had a story to tell. I'm happy to tell you we'll be announcing a work program shortly dealing to the frustrations and the barriers that they face. So why should townies care about making life better for farmers or manufacturers or sellers of food? We are a trading nation. We pay our bills from our goods exports, and 80% of those are from the primary sector. When our farmers and growers have the confidence to invest in their businesses, the outcome is pretty simple. They spend more money locally, that investment drives productivity, meaning more exports. This means those businesses in the agri sector need to employ more people. This will drive wage growth. These people themselves may well invest in their own business, and so it goes on. The economic improvement spreads out from the farms to the cities. On the left, they'll scream and call this trickle-down economics. I just call it the law of supply and demand, a concept not much understood on the other side of the house. Now, you may not think that potentially you are one of the people who will benefit from this economic growth. I would argue that everyone will benefit. But regardless, let's just say that you don't. How does this all help you buy a block of butter? Well, our system effectively treats everyone as if they are Fonterra-sized and exporting. By making it easier for smaller producers to try different things, then you have the ability for more competition to emerge. We have a lot of well-intentioned rules in food safety, but quite frankly, some of them are duplicative and unneeded. They don't need to start from the premise that food and retailers and manufacturers, they all want their customers to have a food experience that's enjoyable and thus become repeat consumers. With less red tape and more competition, you reduce costs. It benefits the customer and directly impacts positively on the cost of living. Now, all that's just from my portfolios, but ACT is delivering across the board for rural New Zealand. The insane climate agenda of the previous lot would have driven food production offshore, to places with laughable records on emissions, whilst crippling our exports and doing nothing to save the planet. So we secured commitments to keep ag out of the ETS and maintain the split gas approach, and review the science that currently treats cow burps the same way as coal burners. This all leaves the question, what will we do about the Paris Agreement that drives a lot of this nonsense? To which I say, watch this space. Thank you.
From the paddock to the building site, our next speaker is a civil engineer who spent his life turning plans into action, and now he's doing the same in Parliament. Simon Court is the Parliamentary Under-Secretary for Infrastructure and RMA Reform. He's in the engine room, fixing the root cause of New Zealand's cost of living crisis, making it easier to build new homes, businesses and infrastructure. Please welcome the man with a plan, and a bulldozer if necessary, Simon Court.
Thank you, Cameron. Good afternoon, everybody. First, let's talk about the cost of living. Why is it so expensive to buy groceries, to rent or own a home, to keep the lights on, or to drive on what should be safe roads? It's because it's too hard to build anything in this country. A supermarket, a house, a road, a power station. It often takes longer to get permission than it does to build the darn thing. That's insane. Look at IKEA in Auckland. They were told they had to invite 7 different iwi groups to conduct cultural monitoring, to say karakia or prayers and conduct other ceremonies at every single stage of construction. They had to consult iwi on erosion control, stormwater treatment, fencing, planting, walkways, you name it. They were even told they had to grant these groups on-demand access to the worksite at any time for monitoring. You can't make this stuff up. And this is not an isolated case. I recently obtained copies of the resource consents for solar farms in central Hawke's Bay. Those consents demanded iwi to say a prayer whenever a native plant was removed, and to build a viewing area for people who might want to rock up, park up and look at a solar farm. Look, they had to provide detailed planting plans, spreadsheet level detail on what species would go where and how far apart. These are just the projects that survive to get built, but too many die before they even start. They're buried under layers of objections from people whose property or environment isn't even affected. And those rights to object are not awarded equally. They often depend on your ancestry. And when vetoes don't kill a project outright, the lasagna of conditions that we layer up, so thick, many investors just give up. One of those solar companies actually went bust. They went into liquidation before a single shovel even entered the ground. Their project was uneconomic. Many others take one look at our rules and say, we'll just go and invest somewhere else, different country. It's killing jobs, it's killing opportunity, and it's stifling progress in New Zealand. And let's be honest about what it's actually doing to our culture. Because some developers are now offering these conditions proactively, hoping councils and people who might object will approve their proposals faster. You pay for this culture of compliance in your power bill, and you pay for it at the checkout. And the root cause is the Resource Management Act, the RMA. This 30-year-old law was designed to allow development and protect the environment, but it's actually failed miserably at both. And that is why ACT is leading the charge to scrap it. We're going to replace the old RMA with a new system entirely based on property rights, common sense, and this radical idea that people in New Zealand can have nice things. Who knew? I will say that the new system will say that your land is your land and you can do with it what you like, as long as you're not harming others' property or the environment. Under Act's reforms, homes will get built. We will have infrastructure like a first world country, and we won't be arguing for a generation about where it goes and what gets built. We'll have new energy generation. It will be feasible again to build coal, gas of course, hydro, solar, and maybe one day, if we need it, nuclear. Because New Zealand must be a first world country where people don't shiver in the dark in winter and fear blackouts. Where businesses can expand, where people can own their own home, because the alternative is what we have now. A generation that's on the brink of giving up. People leaving for Australia at record rates. Anyone who's bright is left behind, has to work all the harder to keep ship New Zealand afloat. And now if young people see no chance of owning their own property, they'll have no problem voting to tax someone else's property. But ACT says enough of that. We are driving RMA reform, and that will make New Zealand affordable again. We will pass the new system into law in 2026, and it will come into effect in 2027. But let me make this crystal clear. None of this happens without ACT in government. We are the only party that has always said, burn the RMA to the ground and start over with a system based on property rights. So in 2026, we'll be back, we'll be asking for your vote, because to finish the job, to deliver that future, to embed a property rights-based system, we need ACT in the room. No more delays, no more excuses. It's time to build. Thank you very much.
It's now time to introduce our guest speaker. Last year we had Paul Henry, who gave us an extraordinary rev-up, tackling the worst whining instincts of the media and the left. Today we have someone who speaks to challenges faced not just in New Zealand but across the Western world. Dr. James Lindsay has made his name tracking a quiet but corrosive shift, one that began in American universities and has since spread into our own schools, government departments and institutions. It's a shift away from the values that built the free world: freedom of speech, open debate and equal treatment under the law. Instead, it's moved us towards something far more troubling: a worldview where simple disagreement is treated as harm and where compliance is demanded, not earned. It's happening here, and if we comply, we risk waking up in a country that no longer feels like the one we know and love. Look, James could be described as a defender of liberalism, but I mean that in the classical sense. The label has been so abused, so let's be specific about what liberalism ought to mean. Individual freedom, freedom of expression, equality before the law, limited government and the right to raise a family, run a business and speak your mind without needing permission. These ideas shouldn't be controversial, but right now in America, in New Zealand, in the UK and beyond, they're under pressure. And it's exactly that reason why we're so glad to have Dr. James Lindsay with us today. He's a mathematician, an author, and the founder of New Discourses. His best-selling book, Cynical Theories, has become a global touchpoint, exposing how radical ideology enters institutions under the banner of social justice. His message is simple but urgent. If we abandon liberal values, we lose the freedoms that define us. So please join me in welcoming someone who brings clarity to confusion, courage in the face of cowardness, and a message that New Zealand needs to hear. Dr. James Lindsay.
This is going to sound absolutely insane, but it's actually true.
Critical consciousness is a derivative of what the Marxists called class consciousness.
It plays on people's best nature. It takes good people and twists them to its purpose.
So the easiest way to say it is that you use critical theory, which is an update of Marxist theory, and you believe the world is separated into an intrinsic conflict between oppressor and oppressed that has to be resolved through amplifying that conflict.
You're not allowed to disagree with it. Anything you say, you get branded with these horrible, stigmas. They try to cancel people.
They are highly invested in identity politics to create a powerful enough oppressed coalition to flip over the power structure by putting ourselves at the center and claiming power for ourselves.
That they believe that something like Starbucks is a big corporation, and when it comes into a neighborhood, it starts taking resources capitalist resources, money.
Having a critical consciousness about the way the world is organized.
From that neighborhood and then dumping it into a corporation, and they see that as a form of violence against the neighborhood. So they're justified in using violence to disrupt that.
And I've talked to young women in the United States who go through these struggles that they have for themselves. They get hired in a good tech job. That I get hired because I'm a woman or because I can program.
Rewriting history, lying about people, digging up people's past to cancel them. It's unbelievable.
Punish people and think it's the moral thing to do. That's where you've got some danger going on.
Equal and opposite, or in biblical terms, answering evil with evil, which the Bible says not to do, by the way.
You get this short-term boost, then a long-term cost, which is that you start to lose trust in the system that's assigning based on a characteristic other than character and merit.
This is explicitly woke, having a critical consciousness about the way the world is organized.
I need to set a timer for your safety, so bear with me. I didn't know if this was going to count me down, so I have to turn this on or I'll talk for the entire day. Thank you so much for having me. It's this really great privilege, as everybody said, to get to come speak, but it's an extra great privilege to get to speak in another country, which is this kind of weird, huge honor that I don't really know how to process except to say that I'm very grateful. So David, thank you for having me. ACT, thank you for having me. All of you wonderful Kiwis, thank you for supporting me. I've had a wonderful trip. This time I was here in March, and I had a wonderful welcome in March as well. Where I come from, we call that Southern hospitality, and I guess you guys have really Southern hospitality. I finally found a joke you guys will laugh at. New Zealand doesn't go anywhere. Because you say Zed, not Z, but it's a pun. Just teasing. No, so it's also intimidating to come speak about politics in a foreign country where you know very little about the politics. It's, I don't want to be presumptive or arrogant. I also understand there are a lot of sensitivities that you have to be aware of, that the culture is developed. It's another thing entirely to have to come speak about politics in a foreign country at a political rally in front of the Deputy Prime Minister. So I'm not going to speak about politics, or not too much. I thought, what can an American bring to this kind of a circumstance? And of course, you heard on the video that introduced me that I talk quite a lot about Marxism and its evolution through to the West in the United States. And so I could talk to you about that because that's universal, but I want to talk to you about universal principles because the ACT Party represents universal principles that I stand for, that I think are the solution to this problem. And so I particularly want to talk about three universal principles that your party represents that I think are able to make a gigantic difference for New Zealand and also to make a mark on the world by taking a stand for them, which this party has taken a torch and is carrying it. Those three a unified voice or a unified vision by which New Zealand can progress, or the United States could progress for me. There's a funny trick. There are two ways to get to unity. One way is you tell everybody this is the party line and everybody's going to do it, and you find ways to force that. Mao Zedong famously did that with a formula he called unity, criticism, unity. Between the individual or the private sector and the public sector are completely different. In fact, individuals have a lot of incentives that the government literally cannot have. And so when you align with incentives, you get good outcomes because that's aligning with reality. Charlie Munger, doesn't matter if you like him or even know who he is, he was Warren Buffett's investment partner. So he knew a thing or two about something. He managed to make billions of dollars, and that's US billions, so it's a lot. And one of his principles was, if you show me the incentive, I will show you the outcome. I think about this virtually every day. Show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. So that said, what are the incentives involved with having a problem? Let's say I'm a guy, I am, still, and I have a problem. Here's some incentives. I have an incentive to solve my problem because I don't want my problem. Now, if you're my bureaucrat, I might go tell you about my problem, and you might care, and you might do something about it when you get around to it, because it's not your problem. So I have an incentive to solve my problem. I have an incentive to solve my problem well. I have an incentive to solve my problem now. And I have an incentive to solve my problem as inexpensively as possible. So what do you get out of allowing people to solve their own problems and getting the government out of the way? Well, number one, they're not dependent on you, so you foster independence. Number two, they have to figure out how to solve their problem. If they knew how to solve it from the beginning, they wouldn't have a problem. So they have to be ingenious. You get innovation. Number three, they want their problem solved now. So you get economy in solving, you get efficiency in solving problems. Number four, they want to solve their problem as cheaply as possible, so economy comes into the picture. They want to save their hard-earned money that they don't have to fix plumbing with. They're going to spend as little money as they can to get the job done, but they need their plumbing to work, so they're going to spend what money they can, but they're not going to spend extra. Turns out the government doesn't have any of these incentives. You're dealing with bureaucrats who care about the problem because they kind of have to, because it's constituents, but they don't have the problem themselves. So there's absolutely no efficiency in how the government's going to address the problem. They're not spending their own money. They're spending taxpayer money. They're spending your money. They're spending everybody else's money. As they say with socialism, right? The problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. They're spending other people's money. They're a third party. It has nothing to do with is government good or is government bad. It is intrinsically true that government is a third party to every problem every citizen has. And a third party has lower motivation to do it, so they're going to bring less efficiency to the solution, less economy to the solution. So you now have an inefficient, ineconomical solution, so you have a bad solution. Often we've seen a lot of ham-fisted attempts by government to solve problems using all these regulations and codes and piles of paperwork and all of these things. So you don't even always get a good solution, and you probably don't get an innovative solution. Necessity is the mother of invention. So what you basically do is you lose everything that you want to have in a growing, prosperous economy and outsource it to people who, frankly, as much as you might care, and I know you're waving to your constituents, you don't care. It's not your job. It's not your problem. So all of these things that make a society and an economy work and to make it great and make it work for people come from getting government as out of the way as possible, letting them do the minimum things, securing rights, protecting the peace. That's about it. Kind of ran out of things that needs to do. And this is extremely important because if you want a prosperous country, you need efficient solutions to problems, you need problems solved, you need economical solutions to problems, and what you need actually are also people who are not dependent, where they have a problem and their first instinct is to try to find somebody to call on the phone to come solve the problem for them. You want independent people, what the Russians called kulaks before they killed all of them. There's a dark point there. You want this. And it turns out, and the ACT Party can use this if it works for them, and if not, I have a cultural insensitivity, but I'm foreign privilege. As it turns out, you have this idea embedded in Kiwi identity. When I came down here in March, the Free Speech Union very gratefully brought me for a tour, and I saw a lot of the country, and I talked to a lot of people, a lot of pubs, a lot of restaurants, a lot of venues all over the country, 5 different cities, and I kept hearing this phrase that I'd never heard before, and I finally asked my host, I asked Nathan from the Free Speech Union, I said, what does this mean? I kept hearing people say, what happened to number 8 wire? So I said, Nathan, what's number 8 wire? And he's like, it's wire. 8-gauge wire. Like you'd make a fence out of? Yeah, like you'd make a fence out of. And I realized that what it is it's a saying that the Kiwis believe that we can fix our problem, and if we don't know what to do, we can just do it with some number 8 wire. Just get a bale of number 8 wire, wrap it up, you're good to go. We can solve our own problem efficiently, economically, with ingenuity, with innovation, using very simple tools, and we don't need anybody to help us do it. This is deep, deep in your identity, apparently, because I heard it in 4 out of the 5 cities I spoke in while I was here, and I think this is probably an important point. Number 8 wire speaks to this value, and it's how Kiwis already identify themselves. Now, in the U.S., we don't have number 8 wire, apparently, because I'd never heard this. Maybe we do have the wire, but we apparently don't use it. But we use duct tape and WD-40. The rule is, if it moves and it's not supposed to, then you use duct tape, and if it doesn't move and it is supposed to, use WD-40. You solve all your problems that way. That's the idea, right? So government does have a function, though. It needs to secure our rights. And this is one of the things that I've just heard, so I know it's a big thing in ACT, is the securing of private property rights. It's very important. In fact, I'm going to go further, that every value that brings prosperity to your country that I just mentioned is accelerated by securing private property and is destroyed if you fail to secure private property, on the one hand. And more than that, securing private property, and I mean this in the absolutely true sense, is the basis of all wealth and abundance. Here's why. What is private property besides the thing that communists hate? Private property is based on this one principle called the fundamental right to exclude. It's very, very simple. So you know about inclusion from DEI. This is exclusion. And that's in fact why inclusion is the value opposed to the fundamental right to exclude or private property. Exclusion means if this is mine, you can't have it unless I agree to the terms by which you take it. I can exclude you from my property, and likewise you can exclude me from yours. That forces us into a situation. This is all common sense, but we all need to hear it again because we've lost touch with this and we've lost faith that this works as a culture, not in this room. If I can exclude you from my property and you can exclude me from your property, let's say maybe I have a hammer and you have $20. We can decide to exchange that property if we both agree, say that the hammer is worth $20. So we can negotiate terms upon which both of us will be happy to make the exchange. And because we have the inalienable fundamental right to exclude, we don't have to agree to the terms. We don't have to be morally guilted into the terms. I understand you've got your brother or your mom or whoever, and they have special ways to lean on you, but that's still you agreeing to the terms through family binds and other bonds that you have between people, other reasons, even giving to charity. You've agreed to give your property to charity for nothing in return except that you were trying to help. So at this point, all exchanges, all trade becomes, this is a really surprisingly simple but deep point, becomes voluntary because both people leave thinking they have more than when they started. Guess what? It's like magic. Abracadabra. Wealth just got created. Two people entered into an exchange and left both with more value. Wealth got created. It's not like physics that matter can never be created or destroyed or whatever except in a nuclear reactor. It is literally, this is where wealth comes from. But it incentivizes, this is about incentives. Secured private property incentivizes more than this. I'm incentivized, for example, let's say we'll use hammers and dollars. I know how to make hammers, and I'm pretty good at making hammers. I'm incentivized to make hammers that I can sell for a profit through this exchange. In other words, I'm incentivized to do things I'm good at, and you are incentivized to do things you are good at. In math, we would call this an optimization function. You are optimizing the prosperity and the economy by getting people to do things that they are better at, to bring their unique God-given talents to whatever question, whatever problem they have, and to say, you know what, I have a problem. I'd really like a fish. I suck at fishing. What can I do? I know I can make a hammer and trade it for a fish. This is very simple economic theory. And I'm incentivized to do the thing that I'm good at to surplus. If I'm good at making hammers, I'm incentivized to do something literally insane. Make 500 hammers. Who wants 500 hammers? Nobody wants 500 hammers, except people who have inventory in hammers that want to sell 499 hammers. They might want to keep the one. So I am now encouraged by the system to make a surplus. And I'm encouraged to do it because of the profit motive involved as cheaply, there's your economy again, and as efficiently as possible. My amount of input, both in time, money, and effort, is to be minimum for the amount of profit I can get out of the thing that I'm trading. So you incentivize the generation of wealth and surplus. when you do this, when you secure private property rights. All I'm talking about is securing private property rights. This is very basic. I'm not asking a lot. We don't need a complicated scheme. We don't need 200 pages of government documents. Secure people's private property rights, and they'll make stuff they're better at making and engage in trade. And if the government's not in the way, they'll do more of it. It's very, very simple. And when you are making an exchange of value where everybody leaves with more value, you're creating wealth. And when people are generating surpluses intentionally, you're creating prosperity and a higher standard of living and abundance. These are the principles that we want to install to get the first world nation that we're talking about. It doesn't come out of the sky, it grows out of the ground. Literally from first principles. And again, ACT carries these principles, and it's very exciting to get to share these principles in this way. If you fail to secure private property rights, though, it's really bad. Why? I know that you guys have your tall poppy, so nobody's angling for a Ferrari or a Rolex or anything. But on the other hand, you might want a store, or you might want a nice home, a relatively modest, nice middle-class home, I guess. You don't want your poppy too tall. In America, we have really big houses and really cool cars. I'm just kidding, but we do. You might want a restaurant. I ate at some restaurants here in town. They're nice. You have a very good food culture. You're very proud of the quality of your food. You're very proud of your New Zealand food. Everything's NZ, 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 all the way down the menu. NZ cheese. Can't get cheese from somewhere else. Don't need it. We have an NZ cheese. I'm very proud of it. It's very good. And it is very good in the other sense, that it's quality and tastes good. Well, you're not going to open a nice restaurant if you have to worry about getting your windows broken every other day. You're not going to open a nice restaurant if you have to worry about about getting robbed all the time or having vandalism done. You're going to invest in worse things. You're not going to take those bigger risks that cause the bigger growths in abundance and prosperity and wealth. You just won't do it. So if you fail to secure private property rights, you get degeneration. You get people holding back. You get people limiting themselves rather than growing into their full expression of what they're able to bring to the society. And then what you get is broken faith. You don't believe in your society anymore. Why try if it's just going to get taken from me or just going to get broken or just going to get destroyed? Why bother? And you end up with a race to the bottom instead of a race to the top. Tall poppy acknowledged. Not all the way to the top, you know. Near the top. Just a little under the top. I'm teasing you because I like you. Okay, so you want to secure that right. You're doing this right. And what do you get out of it? Again, independence, innovation, economy, and efficiency at high levels, generating wealth and surpluses, abundance, and prosperity. Sounds like a pretty good exchange. Notice, by the way, we'll pause for a second, that at no point in the speech have I had to mention what race anybody is in order to have this make sense. These are universal principles. I didn't have to mention if this is men or women. I didn't have to talk about if there are differences between men and women. I didn't have to mention if men can become women or not. It doesn't matter. These are principles that apply to everybody, everywhere, all the time, because they're basic, fundamental economic principles. The things are called things like the law of comparative advantage, which is a fundamental economic principle. The law of supply and demand. These are very fundamental things. The fundamental right to exclude. Very fundamental. Now, the question, though, is the question of fairness. In the Hebrew Bible, since we're trying to be culturally sensitive at all times, we'll reference another culture's holy book. The Hebrew Bible, upon which actually most of Western civilization is based, they have this concept that's brought up many, many, many times, which is the concept of iniquities. God is going to settle the iniquities of the world, which suggests the opposite, which is equity. So what is equity? Equity is your just deserts. Equity is getting what you actually deserved. In other words, if you want an economy that's going to work for people, you want a society that people are going to engage in, you have to have them believe that there's an intrinsic enough sense of fairness, that there is some correlation that's ideally fairly strong between what they put into the system and what they get out of the system. That if they put effort in, that there's effort out. We call this the American dream in America, that if I work hard, I can succeed. I can work hard and build a life. That's equity in its real meaning. Now, we've heard this word equity for several years now, and you're like, but James, that's not equity. That's not what's happening. Equity means something else. So I want to tell you the story of how that got hijacked, because in contrast to the individual rights being secured by equality under the law, governments decided they needed to muck around and create fairness, rather than allowing fairness to arise as the just deserts for people's effort that they put into a system, that they have a reasonable expectation to get out of it, something in proportion to you're not getting. This is a very important point to the people that don't get fairness. You do not get out of the system according to how much you put into it. You get out of the system according to how much value and utility you provide to other people. You have to provide something useful. Karl Marx wrote reams and reams and reams and reams and reams of theory that nobody wanted to read. His mother wrote him a letter. Karl, you write letters about, you write things about capital all the time. It would be nice if you earned some. It's a true story. I'm not making that one up. Karl Marx said that. Karl Marx's mom said that, I should say. You have to provide something that other people benefit from if you're going to get them to engage in voluntary exchange with you. So you're incentivized also, by the way, by that whole thing I've already talked about, to do something useful as opposed to just do something, right? And tyrannical systems don't encourage any of that. Government being too involved doesn't encourage any of that. Well, what I've just described, though, is this kind of vehicle toward innovation, but in particular also to efficiency and economy, which have been for a very long time considered two pillars of public administration. The public sector has to pretend it has these incentives because it doesn't, so it writes policies for itself that it kind of pays attention to and kind of lives up to and kind of meets to simulate this. So will they write a policy saying this is how we're going to be economical in solving other people's problems when we get around to it, and this is how we'll be efficient in getting around to it. We will address your clogged toilet within 2 weeks. You know, thank you for your call to the NZ government website or whatever. You know, it's good luck in the meantime, guys. And don't get the number 8 wire out, whatever you do. We've got this. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Most dangerous words in the universe. So back in 1968 at this thing called the Brooke Conference, which happened in the United States, unfortunately, to my shame, a man named George Frederickson was articulating this idea that public administration had these two pillars of efficiency and economy worked into it. He didn't mention because they have no incentive to do it without making public administration policy, but that's why. They have to simulate what the natural incentives provide for people when government's more out of the way. And so he says, but this isn't enough. Efficiency and economy are only 2 legs of a stool, and you need 3 legs to hold a stool up, so we need a 3rd leg, which is equity. And here's how he defines it. Does he define it as just desserts? No. That's the Hebrew Bible way. That's out. We're going to do something different now. He defines it instead this way. He says, where equality means, this is an exact quote, where equality means citizens A and B are equal, equity means adjusting shares so that citizens A and B are made equal. So you have a public administration system that adjusts shares to make citizens equal. That is the definition for another word, not equity. Equity is just desserts. That is socialism. That is the definition of socialism. And the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money, plus all the incentives are completely fake and wrong. They won't work. So now we have in public administration this new idea of equity being the adjusting of shares to make citizens equal. And they build out this whole apparatus, this equity program, and it's somehow going to be done through diversity and somewhat whatever inclusion means. And we're all confused, and we say we like diversity. Diversity is our strength. We all say the mantra. We say inclusion is very important. I care. I wish there were more people of different backgrounds. It'd be great. They bring in different ideas. We go along with the whole thing. Equity, yeah, of course. We need to make things more fair. Whatever, I guess, and we all just kind of sleepwalk through this. And do you know the real origin of this? It's not George Frederickson at the Brooke Conference in 1968. These policies actually come from a much darker place. Since I'm in New Zealand, I get to make a Lord of the Rings joke. Obviously, I'm in Middle Earth, so I get to say that I can say this in the language of Mordor, which is called the Soviet Union, which is where it came from. In the 1920s in the Soviet Union, the policy that they employed was something called faktическое равенство. My Russian sucks, so if you speak Russian, do not point it out. But what that approximately was supposed to mean is actual equality. The government was going to create equality across all economic markers, all social markers, and all cultural markers. Sounds like equity, doesn't it? We're going to adjust for all of the inequities that were produced by the Russian czars against the minority ethnicities, the Ukrainians, the Georgians, and so on. We're going to fix all that. And there will be total equality on all levels, because until then, communism won't work. Facta Českoja Rawenstvo. That's the name of equity in its original Mordor language of Baradur, or aka Moscow. This was come up with by Lenin. This was Lenin's policy for the Soviet Union. We've imported it through the American universities in a new guise. DEI sounds nice. Nice, pretty words. Actual equality doesn't sound that bad either, though. And to make the actual equality program work, they implemented this thing Stalin came up with called Korenizatsiya. You are intimately familiar with Korenizatsiya here in New Zealand, I am afraid to tell you. Korenizatsiya, Korini means roots in Russian. Korenizatsiya, izatsiya is like to do or to ify, like rootification, if you were to follow the language, to put roots in. It's also indigenization, and that's going to touch a little closer to the bone. The idea was, under the Korenizatsiya program, that the Soviets would go around and tell all of the ethnic minorities, the Georgians, the Ukrainians in particular, that the Russians want to force you all to be Russian and to live on Russian terms and have Russian identity and speak Russian language. The Soviets, on the other hand, believe in self-determination for the ethnic minorities. You get to speak your own languages, have your own languages in your schools. You get to do things on your own terms. But did you know that your terms are not Russian terms, and you've already adopted a lot of Russian? The Soviets are going to help you with that. You're actually much more socialist than they are, and they don't want you to know that. They're imposing something called Great Russian Chauvinism on you, and we're going to help you break free. This was literally the message. Stalin called this Marxism and the National Question. He wrote it down in 1913, before the Soviet Union existed. And the idea was that they would help people that were, say, Ukrainians, rise to positions of prominence in local councils and in the Soviet Party Congress, so that they would be able to bring representation to those bodies. But the representation would be that the Soviets were going to make sure that they only picked the right people, and the right people were going to be picked according to another policy in this suite that was called Raznobratsiya. Raznobratsiya is literally the word in Russian for diversity. Lenin, by this, meant diversity in form to yield unity in content. That's exactly what he said it was supposed to mean. So you have a bunch of people from different backgrounds or who look different, who all think the same way. They all, as the modern language in the video that preceded me showed, have a critical consciousness of how they're supposed to be whoever they are. This is your identity politics as diversity, or Raznobratsiya. So the Soviets would use the Raznobratsiya to determine who were the good socialists among the Ukrainians, elevate them to positions of power of Ukraine, over Ukraine, and then bring some of them to be in the Party Congress in Moscow. And guess what happened when they were in the Party Congress of Moscow? See if this sounds familiar. If the Ukrainian suggested a radical idea that maybe he got put up to suggesting, and then somebody else said that's a bad idea, you're just doing Great Russian Chauvinism. He got accused of bigotry. You're bigoted against the Ukrainians. It's not that it's a bad idea, you just have bigotry. We've been adopting this program since the 1970s throughout the West, and it went into overdrive in 2020. And this is a Soviet program. So this brings us to kind of more contentious issues, and I'll wrap up quickly after that. You have, for example, I won't get into all of your politics, but I'm going to touch the one that I actually have heard of and know, which is the Mātauranga Māori. Two systems. I could have given a 30-minute lecture on this instead, about what this represents. But I'll tell you what it represents in terms of Korenizatsiya. It is a wedge. It has absolutely nothing to do with anything about sensitivity for any people, anywhere at all. It is a way to use the excuse of ethnic status to drive a wedge into New Zealand society according to communist principles. And you say, James, brother, you're foreign, don't talk about our stuff. This is a sensitive thing. Blah, 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 I don't care, I'm leaving tomorrow. Let me be very plain. Communists are not good people. They do not have good principles. Mātauranga Māori can be whatever in the universe it is, and in the hands of a communist, It is nothing but a weapon against the society they want to destroy. And I can tell you this, as far as cultural sensitivity goes, there is not a single Maori or any other person in this country or in this world who is benefited by communism. They will use your group like they used the Ukrainians. They will use your group and they will screw you over when they're done with you. The philosophy itself, from Hegel preceding Marx, contains this sentence: history uses people and then discards them. They will use the Maori and then they will discard them. How do I know? Because the Koreanizatsiya program you're installing in this country is the Koreanizatsiya program that Stalin and Lenin installed in Soviet Union, where they lifted up the Ukrainians, and then in 1929, Stalin decided it was no longer advantageous to lift up this body of ethnic strife that he had created. Everybody will be Russian now, how ironic. And he killed 9 million Ukrainians to drive home the point that they're not self-determining people anymore. And the people he killed the most were the kulaks, who were the self-reliant, independent farmers who could handle their own with a bale of number 8 wire. And it didn't matter what their background was. It didn't matter that they were elevated before. This is communism. And it does not benefit anybody to step into a communist manipulation of any value, whether that's one of our principles, love your neighbor, put on a mask, or whether it's one of their values. It does not matter. It's evil. So what is the opportunity for New Zealand here? New Zealand has a very unique opportunity. I get to again speak with foreign privilege as an American. America has decided we're going to fight back against this woke, that we're going to re-articulate, maybe through an imperfect golden instrument, we're going to re-articulate these principles of self-government and of independence and of economy and efficiency and getting the government out of the way. And among the other nations in this world that speak English, every single one of them but New Zealand has crapped the bed. They said, oh my God, the President of the United States, we're not allowed to call him by his name in Canada anymore, the President of the United States, who shall not be named like Voldemort, is so bad we have to elect Mark Carney. In Australia, they did the same thing. We need a super left government. Look at the UK, look at Ireland. For God's sake, look at South Africa. And New Zealand hasn't lost its mind. I told people this while I got here, and they said, no, it has. No, it hasn't, not like them. And the ACT Party represents an opportunity to miss that bullet. The ACT Party is articulating these principles. It is giving a vision for Kiwis, young and old and in between, to believe in prosperity, believe in the opportunity of their country, to build the country the way that it was made already to be prosperous and to be even more prosperous in the future, to give back the faith that this country can succeed and its people can be prosperous and that there can be abundance, that this can be a strong, solid first world nation. And if you do it while rejecting the woke, you send an earthquake through the world, even as small of a nation as you are, because Trump might be an anomaly. But if a second country stands up and says, we're not doing woke anymore, that's the beginning of a pattern. And the beginning of a pattern is the beginning of a wave, and we can put this behind us, and we can get on with freedom, with liberty, and with success. So the opportunity for New Zealand is to say no to these evil programs, to say yes to prosperity and the principles that bring them, to carry that flame, and to shock the world by taking this road, which isn't the Trump road, by the way, in its own way, rather than following the radical left everywhere it wants to go. Thank you for letting me bring this message.
Thank you, Dr. Lindsay, for that powerful message and for standing up for the values that built the free world. Here in New Zealand, I know a guy who's championed the same values: freedom, reason, common sense and individual rights through every political storm. He's taken on the bureaucracy, challenged the status quo, and never has been afraid to say what others won't. He's the reason actors in government, and he's even changing the media. He's the only politician I know who releases every press conference himself, uncut, unedited, raw and real in 4K on YouTube, so you can judge for yourself. So, here's a look at David in action.
G'day folks, how are you? Howdy folks. Hi folks, how you going? Hi folks, another day, another dollar. Kia ora tātou, tēnā korua. Hey folks, happy Tuesday.
And right behind him was the staff member with a camera filming the exchange and the entire interview for the ACT Party's social media channels.
They film Bridge Run every single day at Parliament, and they just film press stand-up, publish the whole thing on the media. ACT's one's called David versus the Media.
If you've ever seen salmon swimming past a bunch of bears, Bridge Run's kind of like that.
This is presumably for David versus the media?
And it has changed the behaviour in terms of, yeah, definitely. If you ask a dumb question, they instead of just being like, oh, that's not a dumb question, move on, they'll argue with you over it. And it is causing journalists to like second guess their questions.
Okay, this is probably the worst question you've ever asked, which is a record, even for you. But for years I've done the interviews and then I've watched what they put online. I understand they've got to crunch down the time, but often they're not trying to inform you, they're trying to misinform you.
The chest is flowing.
I know. This one will get good ratings.
What did you mean when you said this one will get good ratings?
Well, it's pretty simple. Because of some of the inanity of some of the questions that I'm exposed to, I've started putting them on YouTube, and I got to say, a lot of people find it's compelling viewing. Their job is to report what you're saying, and nothing would make me happier than if they reported what I was saying. We've dealt with a few Muppets in our day, and no doubt we'll deal with a few more. Journalists have tried to stop us doing this. They actually asked the Speaker of the House, who's in charge of the property, to block our camera operators from doing this. They've complained to me personally. They've said that they get negative comments online. Well, actually, I get negative comments online because of the image they've created of me. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you, guys. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Cheers. All right, team. Well, thank you very much for your questions, including the racist ones, and we'll see you later.
Well, with that, I would like to introduce David Seymour.
Well, thank you very much, Cam, for that kind introduction. Thank you, James, for visiting and sharing your thinking. I agreed with most of what you said, except for the bit about we have great cars in America. You got to try some European cars sometime. You know, one of the things you said that resonated with me is that Western democracies have lost their mojo. And the book that you sent, I think that explains why. Most of us would like to see universities as sources of enlightened thinking, but I think too often lately they've left people disappointed. The universities seem to resent the society that funds them, and their ideas seem to corrode rather than enlighten its values. That corrosive idea is that there are actually many realities, and your reality, it seems, depends on your identity. You'll hear them say, speaking as an XYZ person, they say that where you come from matters more than where you're going. And hidden in James's book is hope, because if you can define a problem, you can actually solve it. And the problem, I believe, is the lack of a shared reality. You see, the real world, it unites us. When we all muck in, with number 8 wire it seems, and we work on the same problems, we realise how much we actually all have in common. And today I'd like to show how we can not only solve New Zealand's number 1 problem, and others, we can do it with less finger pointing and more problem solving. Now, I want to start by talking about some of those tall poppies, and I didn't know James was going to say that. But there's some people here today that I'd like to thank. Starting with everyone here, you all put ACT MPs in government, and they're now delivering a wall of real change to address our country's problems. We heard from Brooke, Nicole, Andrew, Karen and Simon. They are hard-working heroes in government, bringing about real, tangible changes to the policies of this country, and I thank all of you for the work that you do every day. But ex-Caucus, though, is not just those who are ministers working directly with government departments on policy. Our feistiest and our savviest new MP couldn't be here today. We thought about putting up a pixelated picture, but Laura McClure's deepfake porn bill is an example of addressing an urgent need. And her campaign for that legislation has been reported right around the world. She has a huge future as an effective politician. I want to ask Paramjit, where are you, to stand up. Paramjit Parmar is our brainiest and hardest working parliamentarian. And every weekend she's out there practising hand-to-hand retail politics. Paramjit also has 3 science degrees and owns at least 1 export business. That is more than the entire Green Party combined. Cam Luxton, who you've seen all day, is our MC. Parliament's only licensed building practitioner and its most practical MP. His advocacy for sane liquor laws will succeed this term, and he's on track to give hunters a say in conservation for the first time. And then, now stand up all the way, ACT's own pocket battleship, our whip, Todd Stevenson. Now, Todd's executive experience looking after our caucus and our parliamentary operations is invaluable. But he's also picking up the end-of-life choice baton to give more control to more people over how they go and when they go if they're suffering badly. And many people, I'm sure, one day will be thanking Todd for that. And last, but most definitely not least, his kidneys may only be giving 5%, but the rest of him is giving 200. Give it up for Mark Cameron. The authentic voice of rural New Zealand has pulled off an extraordinary feat. Very few government backbenchers remain nationally visible, but Mark remains at the forefront of every rural debate, and I'm sure James Lindsay will be interested to know that he recently had a viral video that involved him tying up a fence post with number 8 wire. These MPs and the ministers you've heard from are supported by an excellent staff in Wellington, in our electorate offices in Epsom and Tāmaki, and in the party office. And they, in turn, are supported by you. I'd like to thank all of our volunteers. I met a volunteer at this event this morning who travelled from Nelson with all the challenges they're having there to help work making this conference today, what it is today. There's our donors, our Activate committees, and every person who gets out and practices hand-to-hand retail politics, pushing a vision of a free and equal society. To all of you, I thank you. It is a joy and a pleasure to lead this party. And I know that you all have something in common. You know that tall poppy syndrome doesn't build any homes, doesn't grow any businesses, create any jobs or raise any families. Tall poppy syndrome keeps everyone smaller. And if hard work, if courage and results, if they make you a tall poppy, I'm proud that ACT has a whole field of them to stand in, and James, we don't apologise for it. Finally, can I acknowledge nearly 50 New Zealanders who are standing for ACT local in their community's council elections this October. And I know there's at least some of them here because I've met them this morning. Stand up if you're standing for ACT local. There we go. Thank you. Apparently all localised to the centre of the room. Councils, they don't just put up rates. Council bureaucracy, as we heard from Simon Court, puts up the price of everything everywhere. There's building a competing supermarket. It costs too much, and so do groceries as a result. But so do new houses, kids' swimming lessons. Council dysfunction can push up the price of anything.
And so, who do you vote for to get common sense in your council? You get the little booklet, you haven't heard the names, so you tick someone, you choose the person who's going to disappoint you. A few years later, you ask yourself, is that even the one that I ticked? The advantage of ticking an ex-local candidate guarantees what you're getting. Someone who wants to cut out waste, to save your rates, to let you drive your car and park it near where you're trying to go, without dividing your community by when their ancestors arrived on these shores. If those values sound like yours, then I hope that you will support these candidates in your area. Thank you. Meanwhile, back in Wellington, central government, where incidentally I was listening to James talking about your problem is fixing your pipes. I mean, we have a living, breathing model of this in our capital city. The people do not have the right incentive to fix the pipes, I can assure you of that. It's time at halftime for a halftime report card on our government. Our ministers are making real change like we campaigned on, and we've heard of that. But we can also point to our influence beyond the portfolios that ex-ministers and Undersecretary holds. The government is spending a smaller share of the New Zealand economy each and every year across the forecast period of 4 years. And ACT's been at the forefront of saving the taxpayer money. Brooke's gutsy return of common sense to pay equity, i.e. making it about actual gender discrimination, is only the most obvious and fiscally significant example of that. And didn't she suffer some slings and arrows and fire them right back in that particular exchange? By the government taking a smaller share, there is more for your farm, more for your firm, more for your family. That is the logic of the government taking less. Then there's crime. And as we heard from Nicole McKee, we are reversing Labor's mistake of being kind to criminals and just waiting to see if maybe they'll be kind back. Instead of that, we're upholding innocent people's rights by giving criminals more consequences. With Act's 3 strikes, we're applying minimum sentences for repeat offenders. And all the rest, more prison space, less sentencing discounts. Violent crime as a result is coming down, and the values of our community are improving. And then there's this question of the third C. There's the cost of living, there's crime, there's co-governance, where we've removed the divisive Māori Health Authority. We've removed the co-governed 3 warders. We're putting Māori wards to the vote at council elections in October. We're delivering social services on the need of the individual, not their ancestry. And we're rebalancing the educational curriculum, including that pesky Section 127 of the Education Act. Thank you. In short, the government is restoring the spirit of a country built on equal rights regardless of birth. Now, our partners, they abandoned us in defining the treaty principles, so we lost the vote, but we didn't lose the argument. In fact, there's something more important than winning the vote. We won the argument because nobody can explain why New Zealand is better off divided by ancestry, or why honouring the treaty requires racial division. And if they could, how is it possible that they forgot for 2 whole hours to make their arguments in the parliamentary debate? It's now a matter of time before the Treaty Principles Bill, or something like it, passes into law. Everyone here who stood for equal rights in the face of insanity and inanity can stand proud, because you have made it possible for New Zealand to find a better path, because a free society can only exist if someone puts the idea up in lights, and that's what you have all collectively made possible through your support of the ACT Party. Thank you very much for that unflinching support. Thank you. Now, there were 3 C's that preceded the election. I think there's now an H. On healthcare, we are putting productivity ahead of bureaucracy. Since 2018, the health budget has grown from 18 billion to 33 billion. And you might ask, where did the 83% increase go? It was wasted
on endless restructures and ideology that didn't answer the simple question: how do you get more patients seen to faster, or better still, avoid them needing attention in the first place? Now we're increasing productivity at the patient level instead of management restructures to get the full value of that 83% increase. Vaccination rates up, wait times down, training more doctors, building more hospitals, funding new cancer medicines, and reforming Farm Act to actually listen. We're improving access to innovative medicines, and some older ones, that are taken for granted overseas. In each of these cases, the cost of living, co-governance, crime, health, it is too early to declare victory at half-time in a parliamentary term. It's certainly too early for a victory lap. But we can point to tangible action, in fact, a long list of tangible actions that have been taken and steadily improving results in each area. And has this coalition government gone as far as ACT would on each issue? No, it has not. But has it gone further than it would without the ACT Party? Time and again, you can be assured that your voice and your vote have made the future of this country freer, more equal and more prosperous than any other vote could have. And that's why ACT next year will be campaigning to keep this government, i.e. not the other guys, and make it better with more urgency, more reform and a greater commitment to making New Zealanders free and equal. Is it, though, enough? I would say that we have come out of 6 years of a long trouble. In hindsight, March 15 began a period of endless upheaval in New Zealand. Prior to that, we had much happier and simpler times. The big issues of the day were things like, can John Key really convince us to vote for a tea towel as our national flag? Failing that, can he at least get some pandas for Wellington Zoo? In hindsight, they were much happier in simpler times. But since that terror attack, we have faced one upheaval after another. 10 months later, we heard about a place called Wuhan. Many of us for the first time, but we'll never forget it again. We never imagined that our own government would start acting like the one that we think of in that country. In many ways, we are still paying for COVID through the cascade of inflation, then high interest rates, and then recession and unemployment. And that cost of everything remains a key problem that people in New Zealand face. Yes, prices have stopped rising. We have crushed inflation. But prices have not gone back down. The 20% increase in the past 4 years are now baked in to the power bill, the weekly shop, and the price of everything you buy. The question is how we're going to deal with it. And that's where I come back to the work of James Lindsay. Those 6 years of long trouble has left us fatigued. Many people have been left angry and more open to blaming someone than usual. And the scourge of identity politics has left us even more primed than usual to point the finger at someone else. That postmodern disease has set New Zealanders against each other. The idea that our differences are greater than our similarities is a toxic belief. It makes it harder to solve real practical problems when you're busy finding reasons to resent a fellow New Zealander who's actually pretty much just like you. It's tangata whenua against tangata tiriti. It's boomer versus zoomer. It's wealthy against poor. It's urban against farmer. It's employer against employee. Tenant against landlord. And identity politics has a close cousin I call zero-sum thinking. Zero-sum thinking is perhaps the most dangerous frame of thinking that's affected Western society in these past 2 decades. It fits like a glove with identity politics because it's the idea that for you to do better, someone else must do worse. Now, this has happened because it's a deeply human response to divide the world into heroes and villains, people who do good and people who do bad. It's true that sometimes that does happen, but the reality is that most people, most of the time, are actually trying to make things work. And what's more, the success of one group, perhaps someone who's made 500 hammers, often benefits another. Peter Beck's genius has made him very rich, and good on him. But it's also ignited and given liftoff to a New Zealand space industry. When we lose the insight of positive sum thinking, We believe in zero-sum and we become more divided, poorer, worse off politically, worse off culturally, and worse off economically. The reality is, there's only 5 million of us here. We all have far more in common than what separates us, and our success in New Zealand is interdependent. The problems that we all face are shared, and the solutions will only be visible if first we see that basic fact. Now, take just one example of how this goes wrong. You get identity politics and zero-sum thinking, and you don't solve a problem. Throughout the last government, there was a problem with high rents. In fact, this country has had, and still has, a problem with housing. We've got the best land in the world. It's practically empty, but somehow there's not enough habitat for humans. Now, being short of housing, it causes so many other problems. That's true. Students struggle at school when they move from auntie to uncle and one address to another every term. Young people can't see their own way to a property-owning democracy, and they despair. As we heard from Simon Court, they decide to either move to Australia or, worse, stay here and vote Green. The government spends $5 billion per year on rental subsidies to make up for this dysfunctional market. And over the period of the previous government, the average rent rose from $400 to $590. So making more housing available and giving people a bit of hope that they could have a roof over their heads at an affordable price, that's a problem that's worth solving. It's a really big one. It's important. But what followed when Labor saw this problem coming up in lights on their focus group dashboard was a failure of leadership. Instead of pointing out that we face a common problem and we should join hands and solve it together, they instead decided to give their supporters a scapegoat. They decided that actually landlords were to blame, and I suspect they did it for a few reasons. Number one, politics. There's about 3 million voters and only 120,000 landlords. So for every landlord you beat up on, there's 23 people who might vote for you. They say that the most important skill in politics is the ability to count, and at least Labor had that. Number two, they have an asset. Many landlords are cash poor, but if they own an asset, they look like someone who can pay. And number three, they're the one collecting the rent. And so they may, even if they're collecting it to meet a bunch of other costs, it's easy to connect them and blame them for the price rises. So Labor taxed landlords more, proud to say that ACT has restored mortgage interest deductibility. But from the time Labor removed it to the time we restored it, the average weekly rent rose over $100 before falling back again. Labor, though, weren't finished with landlords. They decided to change the Residential Tenancies Act to the point that landlords and tenants were almost co-owners in their property. A fixed-term tenancy would automatically roll over, and to evict, the onus was on the landlord to prove 3 incidents that transgressed the law. None of these policies actually worked. Rents still went up, and they went up because Labor failed to recognise that landlords and tenants face the same basic problem, the short supply and high cost of housing in New Zealand. Now, both sides really needed to reduce their costs, but zero-sum politics distracted everyone from their common goal. Since then, we've taken the tax off. We've laid out a program to get more housing built by analysing the problem and realising that landlords and tenants alike both wanted more homes built. High interest rates, too much tax, not enough supply, it all drives up costs. Landlords are funded by tenants, so the costs get passed on. Realising that we have more in common than what separates us is actually the starting point to solve problems. If everyone wanted more supply, then the test for good policy was, well, will this policy actually make it easier to build a house? Better resource consenting, better infrastructure funding, such as the replacement of 3 waters. It all means it's easier to get new buildings connected. Faster building consents and easier access to new building materials will mean more competition and lower prices to get stuff built. Now, these are concrete changes to policy designed to make it easier to build more houses. More supply makes for a better market and weekly rents actually falling. But this experience, you may be wondering if this is all what happened, why are you talking about this now? It's because it's a really good case study, and it tells us something about how to solve our problems. And it's a pattern, to borrow from James, that is universal. Scapegoating licensed firearms didn't make it safer. In fact, the opposite. Because the truth is that licensed firearm owners and the rest of us all want the same thing: the safe use of firearms and a legal framework that allows it. Scapegoating farmers hasn't made them better environmentalists. Because the truth is, as Andrew alluded, farmers and the rest of us both want the same thing: to look after the land so it maintains its productive value. Scapegoating employers didn't increase real wages. The truth is that employers and employees both want to produce more so they can take more home. Banning oil and gas exploration didn't achieve anything except smashing the confidence of the world to invest in our country. Now, blaming someone might feel good, but we think that building something feels better. So whether you rent or you own, you farm or you teach, you build or you bartend, your future depends on solving the same problems instead of blaming different people. And today we turn to a different challenge. The biggest faced by New Zealanders is the cost of living. People are finding their dollar doesn't stretch too far anymore. But there's something else beside the price rises. There's that fatigue after the 6 years of long trouble. Those short tempers that everyone feels. And you can understand people wanting to go after the banks or the supermarkets or the power companies, because like landlords, they're a very small percentage of voters. They appear to have money, and they're the ones who are collecting the money, so right in the firing line. And it would be the easiest thing in the world for me today to write and give a speech saying they're crooked and they need to be punished somehow, they should be taxed somehow, have their businesses broken up, or be watched over by even toothier watchdogs who really teach them a lesson. But that would be the curse of zero-sum thinking. And I know there's some political risk in me saying all of this. The good news is I'm basically impervious to political risk. People will pile on and say I'm defending big business or whatever, but political risks are part of leadership. We need a more collaborative approach. We need to ask ourselves how we address the shared challenge of getting time-sensitive products to a spread-out population living across a 1,500-kilometre mountain range. The right amount of stock to the right place at the right time at the right price. It's not easy, but at least we can acknowledge everyone wants the same thing. If only we could all realise that. The government has made a good start with its request for information that solicits more competition from foreign supermarkets. And this is something ACT's been saying for years. I was asked at the end of last year, how would ACT do it? And I said, quote, if it was my job, the first thing I'd do is ask some global supermarket chains, hey, why haven't you invested in New Zealand yet? Get the list of reasons they give, start ticking off the barriers we can remove. That's actually what's now happening. And there are more ideas to enhance competition waiting in the wings. We want to avoid the mistakes of envy and vengeance that didn't work getting rents down. We want to see competition and innovation to get those prices down. And here's 4 things I think the government should do towards the end of this year. Number 1, we've got to give people confidence. We've got to tell people it's safe to invest here. The only way we get better services is with more investment. If we want more of the right stuff to show up in the right quantity in the right place at the same time, there's going to have to be more stores, state-of-the-art supply chain management, new distribution centres, and all of that requires investment from people inside New Zealand and outside. We should state to the world that it's a safe place to invest here. Your property rights will be respected by a government that makes laws carefully. We won't be forcibly separating your business or forcing you to sell to your competitors. And if you doubt that, just ask the oil and gas industry happens when the government doesn't make laws carefully. Because when Labor, the Greens and New Zealand First pulled the rug out from them, we learnt a hard lesson. As Crystal Adele said in a recent speech, New Zealand needs foreign investment, but foreign investment doesn't need New Zealand. Now we have to use taxpayer money to show that the oil and gas industry that we're very sorry about all that, and here's a $200 million co-investment if you'll just come back pretty please. That's the situation that we've found ourselves in as taxpayers due to irresponsible lawmaking. Number 2, we should level the playing field with multinationals. There's a grocery supply code that Labor put in place so that supermarkets would negotiate in good faith with their suppliers, but their suppliers don't have to negotiate in good faith with them. And the idea was to protect the orchardist in central Otago or the strawberry grower in Pukekohe from the much larger and nastier supermarket. What they forgot is that most things on the shelves actually come from suppliers much bigger than supermarkets. If you think Woolworths is a big company, try Coca-Cola or Procter & Gamble or Unilever. They also charge New Zealand supermarkets more than Australian ones. The New Zealand government should not stop our supermarkets from negotiating aggressively from multinational corporations, but that's exactly what the government currently does. The grocery supply code should be made two-way for dealing with foreign suppliers. And we should pass a fast-track omnibus bill that acts as a one-stop shop for any applicant who wants to build a chain of 10 or more supermarkets. One law should get their land zoned, their resource consents issued, overseas investment consents issued, and liquor licences done automatically. Because at the moment, trying to get even one store set up can take 28 years. Who overseas is possibly going to consider opening a chain in this country? And as for the liquor licence, how much alcohol harm really comes from Mavis putting a Shiraz in the trolley at New World? Nothing would send a clearer signal that New Zealand is serious than a bespoke legislative welcome mat giving permission for, say, a Walmart or an Aldi or a Tesco to set up a whole chain in one country in one go. And I hope it'll bring a serious extra chain to retail in New Zealand. But even if it doesn't, just the possibility of a new competitor can keep competitive pressure on incumbents, and it will also show us that if no one comes, maybe we misdiagnosed the problem in the first place. Number 4, we should dump Labor's reforms. The Labor Party bet the farm on grocery industry reform. They even passed the grocery industry bill. They set up a grocery commissioner. They required endless monitoring and put millions of dollars a year in costs on the supermarkets and other retailers that are now paid by, well, you as the taxpayer for the enforcement and you as the customer for the compliance. Now, here's the interesting thing. Most of, if not all of the policies applicable to the grocery industry that we face today were put in place by the Labor government. So surely you would hear them raving about how successful their policies are in putting down the prices and making New Zealand more affordable. But instead you hear them constantly complaining that it's all terrible and the market is dysfunctional. Now, if a policy adds cost instead of saving us money, and not even the people that put the policy in place is prepared to defend it, in fact the opposite, then the policy could go and we can get rid of tens of millions of dollars of needless bureaucracy and cost straight away. Simple stuff. Finally, in conclusion, those are 4 practical steps the ACT Party advocates to save New Zealanders money, and all of them could be done by the end of this year. But really, it's just one policy in one area. There's a wider issue at play. It's about how we're going to solve our problems as a country and deliver the prosperity that keeps bringing people to these shores and prevent people from wanting to look offshore for their own and their family's future. If you're looking for finger-pointing, don't look here. We in the ACT Party are interested in practical problem-solving. If you want to find a scapegoat, you can for every problem, but it still won't work. We tried it with the landlords, we tried it with oil and gas, we tried it with farmers, employers, licensed firearm owners. Every time the government goes after a group in society, the problem gets worse. Because as James Reed would sing, actually, we're all connected now. With the cost of living, the solution is not regulation. The solution is competition. A business in New Zealand should fear their competitors, not their own government. It's in that wider lesson that we can escape the long trouble of the past 6 years, by recognising that we New Zealanders have one thing, and one thing only in common. Every one of us is marked out by the fact that we or our ancestors travelled further for a better tomorrow than anyone else on earth. You can check this for yourself, just look at the map, we're way up there. The pioneering spirit, that's the New Zealand spirit, and it brings a unity more powerful than any superficial divisions that people have tried to stoke. The scourge of identity politics that's pulled us apart is ebbing away. It's time for us to come together as a nation of problem solvers. And I said in my maiden statement that, quote, you can tell everyone everything you need to know about a person's politics by acquiring their sincere answer to a simple question. Is wealth a zero-sum game or not? 11 years later, I'd like to think my speeches are better constructed, but the basic point remains true. There are zero-sum people and there are positive-sum people. We face so many challenges after the Trouble. There's only 5 million of us, and we can face it divided by identity politics and the poison of the zero-sum mindset, or we can face it united in the belief that our challenges are very similar and one person's success can lead to another's. Being free, being equal is not just nice to have. It's actually the foundation for the problem solving we need to do as a country. And if we're going to succeed, we must first believe that we are free and that we are equal. That's what ACT will be campaigning to do from now to the next election. On every major challenge that this country faces, how to balance the books, how to be more productive, how to fix healthcare, how to make sure that we transfer real valuable knowledge from one generation to the next. In short, to ensure that this country really does deliver on the promise it's made to so many people who have come to these shores seeking a better tomorrow for themselves and their family. The values of universalism, of problem solving, of unity, of purpose, because each of us face such similar problems and have so much more in common than any superficial divisions sown by the scourge of zero-sum and identity politics. It's the people in this room to whom I'm most grateful for showing up today, buying a ticket and lending your voice and your support to make sure that this political project of making New Zealand the freest and most equal society on earth has real legs in the run-up to next year's election. And with that, I thank you so much for coming. I hope you're going to stick it together because we have a huge 15 months coming up ahead of us. Thank you very much.